get into your assignments on this RStudio cloud. So this is D2L, and there should be an announcement there that has a link to this RStudio cloud. So you would click on that, and you'll need to create an account so you can sign up. And I've already got my account, but I'll show you what it would look like from a student's perspective. I made a sample student. So when you click that link, it should take you to this page once you log in and everything that says welcome to Psych 320 Research Methods 3. And you'll see you can kind of explore some of this stuff. You've got a little guide with some help. It shows you how to work in this RStudio cloud. It has some primers on how to use R and things like that. But the main thing is that we'll be using this Sci3x Research Methods 3, they call it a space. And you should see projects listed here. I only have one right now, but throughout the semester I'll have our projects listed. But let's, before we go into that one, let me just show you what this RStudio Cloud looks like. I'm going to create a new project here. Okay, I'm going to cut out some of that time. It takes about 30 seconds to start a new project. But if you've used RStudio before, this should look really exactly like what it looks like if you download RStudio onto your computer. But this is using it in a browser. And there's some advantages to doing that that I want to talk about, but I want to show you the kind of the approach that we'll be using to use this R. If you've used RStudio before, you've probably done something like this. So you can create a script and enter in commands. So you can do x equals, let's set it to a bunch of numbers. So let's give x a series of 6 numbers. And I'm going to make y. By the way, you can create that little arrow if you hit the option. On my keyboard, it's option or alt and the dash symbol. And then you can create that little arrow there. But let's set y equal to another set of numbers. Make sure it's the same. There we go. And then what you can do is if I select a line, or if I even just leave my cursor there, if I go up to code, I can run that line. And you can see it appears down here in the console, what I just did. And then I'll do the same thing. You can actually hit Command Return, and you can see Y was created down here. But now let's say I want to do a correlation now between X and Y. And I do core X, comma, but then I make it a capital Y. Now R is case sensitive, so this should create an error. And you can see it says error object capital Y not found. And so now I go back up and I can correct that, make it lowercase, but what I wanted you to see is that once I get this correlation, the error stays there. So if I wanted to hand this in as an assignment, it's going to have the error there. Unless I clear it and start over or put it into a word processor and delete it there, the error just kind of scrolls up as you execute more commands. So that's one problem with this approach. Let me show you another thing. So let's say we create a plot. Let's do a scatter plot of X and Y, and I'll go up and run that line. And notice that the plot goes over here where it says plots in a different window. So now I've got my commands over here, I've got my output over here, and then I've got my plot over here. I've got these 3 different windows with different stuff in them, and it's a pain. So the approach that we're going to be using instead of this is we're going to be using these notebooks. And so when you create one of your new assignments for yourself, you're going to go up and do new R notebook, or I think under file you can go new file. It's the same way. It's the same thing. It creates a new R notebook, and you'll get something that looks like this. I've read this 1,000 times, so I always delete this stuff. It kind of tells you what a notebook is. But here's what's cool about it. So what I can do is I can type, whatever I want. It's not R code here. In the white space here, it's just a text editor. But then what I can do is if I go to insert here and insert R, it inserts a little gray area, and anything that I put in here, it has these funny symbols. It's a little back tick. You can actually type that in. You just type in the 3 back ticks, which is the upper left on your keyboard, and then the squiggle, and then R. And then to end it, you type 3 more back ticks. But it's just a lot easier to do that. Yeah, so let me show you what's different about this approach. So I can put in my X variable, and I'll give it some numbers, and then my Y, like that. And now I press this little arrow here, and that will run these commands. And then, so let's say I put in a new little code chunk, and I want to do my correlation. And let's say, like I did before, I make an error, and I use an uppercase Y instead of the lowercase. And now, when I run it, it gives me this error message. But here's the difference with a notebook. I can just go back, fix that, make it a lowercase y, and run it again, and then it just replaces it. The right answer replaces the error, which makes so much more sense. So I can go back and I can correct my errors, and they will leave, and they won't appear on the notebook anymore. And then so I can add in some annotations here. I can say here's the correlation, and let's do another code chunk. By the way, you can press, let's see, it's Command Option I, and that's for insert. It'll insert the code chunk, or you can go up here and do that menu. But now let's do our plot, and I want to do plot XY. And again, if I run that chunk, I get the plot, and it's right there with everything. So I've got my commands here, I've got my annotations, I've got my code, and I've got my output all in one notebook. And then what I can do, and this is really cool, I think I have to save it first. So let's go ahead and save this. Let's call it sample. And after I save it, I can either knit to HTML, or I can just preview the notebook. And it's saying that I have my pop-up blockers on, but there we go. And I got a little out of bounds. There we go. And what it will do is it'll create a web page of my analysis. And then I can publish this and put it on the web, and someone else can look at it, and they can download it. And this approach is just so much nicer of an approach than having your plots in one place and having your code in another place, and then having your output in a third place. Using these notebooks is, I have found, just a much superior way of doing these kinds of analyses.